Welcome back to the Vital Mentality Podcast. I'm your host, Angel Monroe. We're talking all things health and wellness, and we're looking at ways to live a vital life. Short disclaimer, this is not intended as medical advice. This is just for general purposes only. So welcome back. I've had a little bit of a break, but I'm back now. I'm going to try and do one or two of these a month from now on. So this is my first one for the year. And I just thought it would be good to revisit what are the fundamentals that we need to be doing in our daily lives to be healthy, to live long, vital. You don't want to just live for a long time. You want to live well for a long time. So what are the things that we require to do this? I did a post on Instagram in January. It's like some kind of quippy one-liner that was said, in 2026, biohacking is out and biosymbiosis is in. And so I thought it'd be good to kind of flesh out what I mean by that whole statement. And biohacking has been really big in the last couple of years, and I would argue that it still is to some degree. People are always trying to find a way to hack their biology or hack their way to health. And people putting gallons of protein in each meal and using all kinds of gadgets and peptides and like really trying to force their way to health. And I think there's an allure of the hammer approach that will give you quick results, but in the long run, it actually doesn't work. And I would even argue that things like pharmaceuticals and synthetic supplements, that they're kind of a way for us to hack the system as well. And really, we do best when we're in line with nature. So that's definitely what I want to talk about. How do we do that? You've seen, you'll see people in the blue zones in the world that are living, well into 100, 110 well, and they are not doing any of these things. They're not using supplements. And, you even see some of those blue zones. There's 90-year-old men that are still smoking and drinking, but they're still living well, eating local food and, being in the sun all the time and, communing with their community, and they're living really, enriched, vital lives. So, I think there's a real disconnect in our understanding of what it is that we really, really need to be healthy. And I think the most important thing that people miss out on is that we are in relationship to our environment. And I think that relationship is really toxic. And one kind of area where I notice this is, you see people who get really upset and worried about the environment and climate change, simultaneously living very toxic lives, not paying any attention to the food that they're eating, the products they're putting on their body, the materials that their clothes are made out of, all of these things which are damaging to the environment and to their health. And yet being so worried and so emotional about the environment. Like, it is a relationship that we are all responsible for. One of the other things that I see people really struggling for is trying to work out what the perfect diet is. And people you see online a lot, everyone's arguing about what that perfect diet looks like. And, carnivore is really, quite a big diet at the moment. And we've seen that vegetables have been demonized, which was a funny thing to see. Having been part of, like, in the health arena for such a long time, but I was also brought up that way, brought up vegetarian, brought up with very health conscious parents, always, we always shopped at health food stores. So I've seen so many like different fads come in and different foods be demonized, but I'd never thought I would see vegetables get demonized, but the day's come. And one of the things, I've spoken about this before on other platforms, but one of the things that gets talked about with vegetables is oxalates. And I think this is a really good example of what I'm saying is, that all of these things are how we relate to our environment. So oxalates are actually they're found, say, in leafy green vegetables and other vegetables, and it's attributed to things like kidney stones, metabolic dysfunction, so like issues with weight, inflammation, joint pain. What else am I missing? Thyroid issues as well. And there's probably more things that people are saying. And yeah, so they're blaming the oxalates in these poor vegetables. Meanwhile, with our conventional farming, so I'm talking about the food that you would buy generally at the supermarket or the greengrocer at the market, not organic food, not biodynamic food, not homegrown, conventional grown food. To do that, they use synthetic fertilizers, and the synthetic fertilizers increases the synthetic oxalates that are found in food. On top of this, the pesticides that food is sprayed in conventional farming, especially glyphosate, but a few others, when you eat food with that in it, it turns into oxalates in the body. And so we're out here blaming the poor vegetables when it's the conventional farming practices that are producing this synthetic form, which I would say is what is to blame for these things that we're saying, not the spinach. And this is where that disconnect is, that we kind of jump around trying to find the villain. But if we just pared it back and worked out, what do we need as a human to survive? Like, how are we designed to live on this planet? I think we would, have a much better time. I think that one of the issues is we've got this innate dialogue, which is definitely perpetuated from the medical system and the media and insert a million other platforms, that we are flawed and that nature is flawed. And we can see this where like the sun is going to kill us, the sun's going to give us cancer, germs are going to kill us, they're going to give us viruses, that we're going to catch bacteria. And even our natural processes like birth, like menopause, aging, they are pathologized to something that we need to fix. And rather than like these natural processes that we should be able to just move through with ease. And as a result to this ideology, we're sicker than ever. And I think that if we flip that narrative to we're perfect, nature's perfect, it changes our behaviors and it changes our habits. And so if we look at it from that perspective, as we're a human being on this planet, that perfectly designed for each other to work in symbiosis, to work in harmony, then what would humans be designed to? What would we be designed to interact with? What would we be, what would be our behaviors that we're designed to do every day? So we are perfectly designed to interact with the sun and sunlight. We're perfectly designed to be in cycle with the day, which I mean, like what time we eat and what time we move and what time we go to bed. We're perfectly designed to sync up with the cycles of the sun and the moon. We're perfectly designed to drink flowing water, think going through a stream, picking up information as it moves through, as opposed to the water that we get, which is stagnant, going through pipes, lots of chemicals going through it. We're designed to move constantly throughout the day, physically doing all of the things and the work that we're doing. If we were thinking about, cooking all the food, collecting all the food, cleaning everything, building houses, like that's how we would have been designed to be. We're perfectly designed to eat local, seasonal, organic food, not food flown in from around the world, not laden with chemicals. We're perfectly designed to have bare feet on the ground, getting the natural electromagnetic frequency coming from the earth. We are hydroelectric beings, where our energy comes primarily from water and light and electromagnetic frequency. And even you can even say that all of that combines to come through food also. We're perfectly designed to be in cycles with nature. And, in summer we've got aircon on, in winter we've got heaters on. We do not acclimate to our seasons properly at all. And then on top of that, we have fake light environments, keeping us up much later than we should be in the winter. And then what was the other point that I wanted to make about that? It will come to me. We're getting food flown around from the world when we should be eating food that's local. Like, we should be really in sync with what nature gives us at the time. We're perfectly designed to be in community with others, animals, and country. We're designed to have those relationships. Anything in nature that is isolated comes under ill health. And we're perfectly designed to be in houses and clothing, and even think about, cleaning products or things that we put on our body. We're perfectly designed to be bathed in materials that are around us and that are natural. So obviously, in a modern world, we have lots of issues with all of these, like with this perfect design. And, you could say that that's the reason why we have so much disease. What we can do, though, is come back to this list. Like, when we're out of sync, when we've got disease, when we feel like we're aging too much, rather than that hammer approach of, okay, straight away I'm going to go get a pharmaceutical, straight away I'm going to go get a supplement, straight away I'm going to, if we go back to those fundamentals and adjust those and get them and try and hit all of those marks as much as possible, I guarantee we have much, much, much better health. And, when people get unwell, you often hear people say, I had to go and take the pharmaceuticals, I tried everything. If you haven't gone back to those fundamentals and made sure that you're really getting all of those things, and there's definitely ways to do that, even in modern living, then you haven't actually tried everything. So anyway, let's unpack all of that a little bit more. So let's look at the sun. We need the sun, and it's not just for vitamin D. The light that happens in the morning for the first few hours sets up our metabolism, so how we process food, sets up our hormones. So our hormones are in control of, think of every system, every organ, everything that happens in the body. That is set up by the sun that we see in the morning. It also sets up our sleep cycle. So the first light that we see in the morning has a direct effect on how well we sleep and how much melatonin is produced. And I say this all the time, one huge thing that I say people do is sleep with their phones in their rooms. And there's a million and one reasons why you shouldn't sleep with your phone in your room. But one of them is that when you wake up, whether it's in the middle of the night or you sleep through the whole night, if the phone's in your room, 99.999% chance is that you're going to pick that up before you go and see natural light. And the blue light is going to tell your brain a completely different signal to the one it needs. It needs the signals of the light that you get from that sunrise in the morning. So really, we should be waking up, going outside, opening a window, or standing outside, ideally for at least half an hour, but even if it's 2 minutes that you get, and that's just the first signaling that your brain gets before the blue light, it is going to make a world of difference. And, we're kind of after consistency over perfection. So, this is just something that happens every day. You get natural light on your eyes before blue light, and sometimes it's a minute, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's half an hour, but it's consistent, and it's lifelong, and it makes all the difference. So The other thing that people mostly know about is that we need vitamin D from the sun. People have been trying to supplement it. It doesn't work. It damages the liver. And it doesn't represent what the sun gives. It's only vitamin D is a marker, nothing else. And you can't just replicate the marker without getting all of the other things that it does and think that you're going to improve your health long term. Even if people feel like there's some short term benefits, I guess it's because it's a hormone. Lots of synthetic things can make us feel good for a short time, but not for a long time. And yeah, so that hammer approach from vitamin D supplementation doesn't work. And not having enough vitamin D from the sun is associated with all-cause mortality, so meaning death from all causes. So you need to be getting vitamin D from the sun. Sunscreen blocks vitamin D production. So you need exposure, and not to mention all the other chemicals and things that sunscreen does wrong for us. Yeah, we need sun on the skin. Other studies have come out and where they're not even looking at vitamin D, they're just looking at sun avoidance. And that is also associated with all-cause mortality. So avoiding the sun is killing us. And, you know, it's so ingrained in us that we should be avoiding the sun, that it's going to kill us. But it's wrong. It's really, really, really completely wrong. And, you know, you can't go from avoiding the sun, wearing heaps of sunscreen all the time, into, you know, being in the sun for 5 hours a day. You know, that is a real gradual adaptation that needs care, but there is a way to be engaging with the sun safely. We're perfectly designed for that. And if anyone needs help with reorientating that relationship, I can help in that area. We need electromagnetic frequency from the earth. This is feet on the grass, feet on stone, sand, anything natural, dirt. The sun also has a lot of electromagnetic frequency. Touch, movement, even touching a pet, animals. That's why I said we're perfectly designed to commune with our environment, with animals, with humans, hugging a human. This is a electromagnetic frequency. These are all essential. And even, you know, being near the sea, being in the waves, in the water, that has a certain amount of electromagnetic frequency as well. So all of these activities are completely essential. We need these every day. And non-native electromagnetic frequency that we get from electrical objects, phones, computers, Wi-Fi, they interrupt our own frequency, our own EMFs, our natural EMFs, and they're damaging. So we really need to be mindful of that. Keep your phone away from your body. There's this thing called the inverse square law. And so basically, these objects, the further away they are from you, the better it is. So turning your Wi-Fi off at night, some people will say to me, oh, but there's Wi-Fi everywhere, so why would I bother turning it off? Because of that inverse square law. So your neighbor's Wi-Fi isn't going to affect you as much as yours is. So I turn mine off at night when I go to bed. Keep your phone a couple of meters away from you. Keep your phone 5 meters away from you, out of your room. I leave my phone in the hallway for the alarm clock. I can still hear it. And yeah, just as long as you keep all of that stuff away from you as much as possible, you know, try and keep your bed away from, what's that? No, I can't remember, the smart machine, the smart meter. You know, if it's like at our place, it's at the front of our house. My bedroom's at the front of our house, so try and keep the bed away. So you just, as much distance as possible, turning things off as much as possible, and then spending time with all of those natural EMFs that I was stating before. That is how you mediate that issue. Whole food. So the simplest way to think about it is the further away food gets from nature, the worse it is for you. And so as little processing as possible. Anything that you buy in packaging from the supermarket generally has additives and preservatives that are all detrimental to your health. And like I said, a little bit here, a little bit there, whatever. It's not a big deal. But this is like consistency over perfection. You try and make sure that the food that you're getting is as natural, local, no chemicals sprayed on it, organic as possible, and then you're fine. And then if there's a little, treat here and there, or a meal with friends or whatever, it's not going to throw you out. But if you're eating like that every day for years, then yes, that's a massive, massive problem. Eating local and seasonal, there's a kind of hydrogen called deuterium, otherwise known as heavy hydrogen. And you want the right amount of deuterium throughout the year. And eating seasonal food means that you get the right amount of deuterium. So if you have too much, it's associated with all kinds of diseases, insert disease it's associated with. And we basically use more deuterium in the summer, less in the winter. Foods have high deuterium in the summer, less in winter. So things like fruits and carbohydrates and all the things that are really bountiful in summer, high deuterium, and we need more of that in the summer. So we are perfectly geared towards having more carbohydrates in the form of fruits and vegetables in the summer. When it gets into winter, we can still have some, but we need less. We need more fats, more butter, more eggs, those kind of foods. And there's less deuterium in those foods. So, it sounds a bit complicated, but it's not. It's really more carbs in summer, more fats in winter, eating food that's grown in your state, in your area. And that's it. And definitely natural preserving techniques also are really good for our health. So think fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi. We were perfectly designed to preserve things with salt and oil and things like that. So anything that has like artificial preservatives in it, it's not great. You just think about traditional food, seasonal food, and I think you don't really need to get too, much more complicated than that. And of course, organic. In terms of how often people should be eating, I think that we generally overeat. We are overnourished in some ways. And, I think I mentioned before about people trying to have, 20 gazillion grams of protein a day and then trying to hit fiber targets. And, I think when we think about the minutiae of nutrition, and this is coming from a nutritionist, I think we end up in trouble when we do that. We're much better off just following those simple things, making sure things aren't sprayed, using traditional cooking methods, and eating things in season. That's it. And not eating too much. All of the people that lived in the blue zones, so the zones in the world, if you don't know what a blue zone is, so areas in the world where people live well for a long time, they eat till they're 80% full, and they eat seasonal, local, organic food. So not overeating. And if you don't need 3 meals, then you don't need. Some people do well on 2 meals. I personally like doing 2 meals. And, fasting sometimes gets a bad rap, but I think a certain amount of fasting for some people, not everyone, is actually really good. And also, just to take it back to the seasons and to the sun, we should be eating in daylight hours. That's how we are designed. We're not designed to be eating in darkness, and that does have a really big effect on our metabolism and our hormonal function. And so we have longer eating windows in the summer, shorter eating windows in the winter. Movement, you know, you would see when you think about grandparents and stuff, they didn't like worry about exercising all the time. But if we're working and sitting down all the time, then we do need to counter it. So moving your body every day is super important. I really like to do it outside because, like I said before, we need a certain amount of sunlight and on our skin, on our eyes. And if I tried to fit in exercising, going outside, getting barefoot grounding in separate increments, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I like to exercise outside, take my shoes off while I'm doing it. And yeah, it's all done in like 45 minutes. It's really important to note that muscle is a longevity organ, and it's one of the things that really hinders people when they age. And we are just, like I said, we live our lives so much indoors now that it really is an effort to keep muscles working. And it doesn't mean taking more protein powder. It means actually doing body resistance work and or weights. So a few times a week is really important. Move your body every day, making sure that there's weight resistance work or weights a few times a week at least. In terms of water, I mentioned before that when you think about how we're perfectly designed, that water should be flowing through streams, but we don't all get to drink spring water. So filtering water is really important, and having a relationship with water is really important. I filter my water, and under my filter I've got this little disc that re-energizes with like an image, re-energizes the water. But even just holding water up to your heart, because our heart has a frequency, can restructure the water, re-energize the water. Even saying things to the water, talking to your water, communing with your water is really important. I really like having herbal tea. I do that before my coffee. And I think plants commune, and I think it's a really nice way to re-energize the water. So I make herbal tea with the teas that I sell, or sometimes I might use a fulvic acid to remineralize the water, and that is basically the one that I sell as a shilajit tincture, and that comes from the earth, so it kind of is that recommuning with the water that we're after to give the water some vitality. Because water holds memory. We're 99% water, and so our intention with our water is really important. I think I've spoken about water in other podcasts. I'm not going to go over it in great detail today, but if you want to know more about why the water you drink, what quality of the water that you're drinking is, why it's so important, I recommend having a look at Gerald Pollack's work or Veda Austin. Sleep is super important. Of course, it is our restoration time, and there's just so much to say about sleep. I touched on it before with having morning light and turning the Wi-Fi off at night and not sleeping with your phone in your room. Also, other things to note about sleep would be to make sure that you're eating in daylight hours, like I said, because if you start eating too late, it's going to interrupt that wind down period that your body needs. And we really should be trying to get into bed by 9:30, 10. And, there's lots of studies showing what a massive difference it makes just those 2 hours before midnight in terms of our metabolism and hormone function and everything. So yeah, if you're having issues with sleep, please contact me. I'm happy to help with that area. But yeah, those things that I mentioned, really fundamental. I would check before you're worried about anything else that you're doing those things, because those things are always the low-hanging fruit in terms of rectifying sleep. But yeah, I think our light environment has a lot to do with it. So another thing that I like to do is before I go to bed, I read, and I've got a light, because the light that we have, it's especially for some people are way more sensitive. It can be really hard to wind down if you've just had blue light going at night. You know, traditionally we were born to have firelight, but now we have these artificial lights, and I think that's a major problem for a lot of people, especially for those who are a little bit more sensitive. And a really easy thing that I like to do is I use a orange light from a blue blocking place as my reading lamp, and that helps you get off to sleep very well. But for some people, they might need to go to more effort, like changing the lighting in their entire house. But yeah, that's a case by case scenario. But whatever you're doing, if you're not getting a proper night's sleep, then something needs to be addressed, because it affects everything, your metabolism, your immune system, which I don't usually like to use that word, but yeah, it's imperative. This section is the most important, I think. They're all important, but this is something that people miss out on. And this is symptoms. We stop collectively, when people get sick, they try and stop the symptoms. Symptoms are completely necessary. They're the body's therapy, and there is a lot of evidence that when we try and interrupt a symptom rather than letting them, live there to their fruition, we end up in ill health. So using antibiotics is attributed with all-cause mortality, an increase in all-cause mortality, so all causes of death. Stopping a fever with things like Panadol or paracetamol or anti-inflammatories is associated with an increased risk of cancer. And I could probably go on and on. Like using antibiotics for UTIs is associated with an increased risk of UTIs, urinary tract infections. This idea that we need to, when we get sick, we immediately need to go and try and stop these symptoms, I think is a huge cause of issues for people. And if we just allowed ourselves that time to rest when we're unwell, I think collectively we would be in much better health. And yeah, that's something that I was very fortunate that I was brought up with. My parents never took me to a doctor if I was sick. I never took antibiotics until I was 21, and maybe I was 19, and I went to hospital. I had pneumonia, and I don't even remember consenting to the antibiotics. It was given to me intravenously because I was in a really bad way when I was taken in an ambulance to hospital, and that's the only time I've had antibiotics. And to me, that's the only time that they're necessary in extreme crisis. Otherwise, and I've been sick, it's not like good luck that I have needed to not use antibiotics. I've been sick. I get sick. And especially when I was in my 20s, I had bronchitis, lots of lung things all the time, like really long stints of bronchitis and other illnesses. And I've never taken it. And I think people have this idea that if they don't take the antibiotics, or if they don't stop the fever, they are going to get sicker, and then they're going to die, or I don't know what's going to happen. But if you just rest, you listen to your body, eat whole food, drink broths, tea, I do castor oil packs. There's all kinds of things that you can kind of do to gently move yourself through acute illness. It will change your life. Yeah, it's a really, really big one for me. Natural fibers, like I said, we're perfectly designed to wear natural fibers. If you think about how we would have lived without modern living, we would just be covering ourselves in the things that are around. And, it's very well documented that synthetic fibers wreak havoc on fertility, hormones, metabolism. They can be carcinogenic. And, cleaning products and products that you put on your body, makeup, all of these things pose all of these same kind of risks. And, that's why I have the shop, and I've like very careful about the curated products that have gone on there to make sure there is nothing that's going to cause anyone any issues, because it's a huge determinant of health and we ignore it. And then I would just finish off with belief. Belief is a really big, if you believe that you have a disease, if you believe that if we lock into the idea of disease, and this is documented as well in the literature, that we have worse outcomes. So our emotional health, our belief systems, our connection to community is really important. So having a practice, whether it's meditating or contemplation or, whatever it is for you, having a practice that keeps your emotional, spiritual, energetic health intact. We need that hygiene, that spiritual, energetic, emotional hygiene is going to help us thrive as well. And I think that's why we see in those blue zones, one of the reasons why you see people, these communities doing so well, is because they are in community, they are with nature, and they do have a real connection to spirit and place. And I think that's it. I've covered a lot, but what I think I've said this already, but it's really important that if you're in ill health, that we check all of these things before we start jumping to those hammer approaches. And if we all focused a little bit on all of these areas every single day, I think we'd all feel a lot better. So I hope that was helpful. Please reach out if you want to know anything else. And if anyone has any suggestions on some of the topics that they'd like to talk about, please let me know. I am open. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Until next time.